Before we look for God's green light, we must ask, have we been quiet long enough to hear it? In this age of noise where love is a word thrown around like confetti and feelings are crowned as kings, we forget that the author of love is not reckless nor vague. He is intentional. He does not bless chaos. He blesses purpose. If you seek the kind of relationship that carries the weight of glory, the kind that is not just romantic but redemptive, then these three signs are not merely suggestions. They are warnings and wonders alike. Sign one, it awakens, not replaces your walk with God. There is a kind of love that makes you forget who you are. It consumes, distracts, and numbs. But there is another kind, a rare and reverent kind, that calls you to remember who you were before them and become even more of it beside them. This love does not compete with God, it magnifies Him. When you find yourself praying more clearly, walking more uprightly, and desiring more of heaven because of who they are, pause. That's not just chemistry, that's clarity. The right person won't demand your faith die to make the relationship live. They will meet you in the shadow of the cross and grow with you in the light of His truth. Sign two, it endures storm, not just sunshine. It is a shallow love that only survives in summer. But God does not write shallow stories. The couples He molds in fire come out as gold, not because they are without flaw, but because their hearts are knit not just by attraction, but by mission. Have you fought and still chosen one another? Have you disagreed without destroying each other? When the emotions ran dry, did commitment keep going? Affliction is not the end of a godly relationship. Often it is its testing ground. If your relationship can bend without breaking, hold on. You may be witnessing something sacred. Sign three, peace stays when the passion fades. In early love, passion burns hot and loud. But the green light from God isn't always marked by fire. It is often marked by peace. Not the peace of ease, but the kind that surpasses understanding. Does your soul rest around them even in silence? Do they make you feel more human, not just more wanted? The green light is not a shout, it's a whisper. A calm in your gut. A strange stillness in your thoughts. You may not always feel in love, but you will know you are safe. That knowledge is not man-made, it is holy. So as you stand at the crossroads between heart and heaven, ask yourself, does this relationship lead me home? A green light from God is not just an invitation to begin, but a confirmation that He walks with you in it. Let passion be present, but not primary. Let joy be loud, but peace louder. And above all, let the love you seek be one that echoes eternity, not just the moment. We are creatures of time, dwelling within the boundaries of fleeting hours and numbered days. Yet something within us aches for what time cannot touch. This longing, often dismissed, sometimes misunderstood, is not an illusion. It is the echo of eternity woven into our very souls. And if we are to make sense of life, of love, and of relationships, we must start here with the reality that the temporal only finds meaning when it is tethered to the eternal. Too often we approach relationships with short-sighted vision. We ask, does these feel right? Do I enjoy their company? Will this satisfy my present desire? But these questions are of the moment. They do not ask what will endure, only what will entertain. The problem with based questions is that they yield moment-sized answers. And when the storms of life inevitably come, when emotions fade, beauty ages, and comfort is tested, moment-sized answers prove too small to carry the weight of love. If we build on what is passing, we will inherit only what can pass away. But when we build with eternity in mind, with values that surpass emotion, with virtues that align with heaven, with character that reflects God, we are no longer crafting temporary attachments, but eternal investments. We are no longer asking love to serve us, but inviting it to shape us. To say the eternal must inform the temporal is to say that every temporary decision must be governed by something that lasts. Not only in romantic relationships, but in all things, careers, friendships, goals. But in romance especially, we are tempted to believe that what we feel now is all that matters. That passion alone is permission. That chemistry is calling. Yet none of these are eternal. Feelings shift. Attraction changes. But the eternal asks different questions. Does this relationship make me more like Christ? Does it anchor me in virtue or pull me away from it? Am I building something here that heaven would recognize as good? Eternal vision requires sacrifice. It means saying no to what dazzles if it cannot endure. It means choosing discipline over desire, character over compatibility, covenant over comfort. But it is precisely these kinds of choices that produce peace, the kind that isn't dependent on circumstance. When two people come together with eternity in mind, they are not merely choosing each other for now, they are choosing each other for the long road, for the refining fire, for the maifon, for the sanctification of their souls. They are not running from loneliness, they are running toward purpose. A purpose not defined by Instagram quotes or cultural trends, but by divine design. And this divine design is not casual about love. Heaven does not deal in infatuation. God's view of love is covenantal, sacrificial, purifying. His word does not say follow your heart, it says guard it. Not because love is bad, but because it is powerful. And what is powerful must be handled with reverence. To make decisions rooted in eternity is to trust that what God ordains will bring greater joy than what the world offers. It is to believe that holiness is not the enemy of happiness, but its foundation. It is to look past the immediate thrill and ask, will this draw me closer to heaven or deeper into myself? We must not confuse emotional peace with eternal peace. The former can be manipulated by mood, environment, and novelty. The latter comes only when the soul is aligned with truth, and truth, real truth, is not born in preference but in principle. Eternal principles. This is why spiritual compatibility must never be an afterthought. A relationship that ignores the eternal becomes a temporary shelter, at best, and a collapsing ruin at worst. But a relationship rooted in eternity becomes a temple. It becomes a place where the presence of God is welcomed, where the hearts of both are shaped not just for each other, but for Him. There is wisdom in remembering that we are not merely choosing who to spend our weekends with, we are choosing who we will suffer with, build with, pray with, grow with, and one day perhaps even raise new souls with. And if the eternal is not in that foundation, the house will fall. It may stand for a season, but not for a lifetime, not for forever. The world rushes to define compatibility by interest, appearance, charm, and ease. But eternity does not measure that way. Eternity asks, does this reflect love as God defines it? That love is patient. That love is kind. That love rejoices in the truth. That love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. It is not a weak, romantic notion. It is a refining, relentless one. The eternal does not merely bless our desires, it tests them. And only what survives the testing is worth calling love at all. There is a peculiar danger hidden within the sweetest things. The human heart, ever hungry for comfort and connection, is prone to make idols not from evil, but from what is good. And of all the good gifts God has given us, affection is one of the most easily corrupted. It is gentle and warm, a natural outpouring of the soul. Yet if left unchecked, affection can swell into something it was never meant to be, a god. And when anything becomes a god, it demands sacrifice. Affection is not the enemy. It is a blessing, a gift from God meant to enrich human life. It is the warmth between friends, the bond between parents and children, the deep stirrings of romantic love. But like fire, affection must be contained, not suppressed but ordered, not rejected but rightly placed. The problem arises when we begin to believe that the object of our affection is the source of our fulfillment. When we seek from a person what only God can supply, we do not love them, we worship them. And worship always requires an altar, so we lay ourselves down. We compromise values to avoid losing them. We silence our conscience when they cross boundaries. We endure spiritual decline in the name of love, not realizing that we are no longer loving, they have become Lord. Affection must never sit on the throne. It must bow before the one who made it. A relationship that begins in affection and grows into idolatry will feel intoxicating at first. The closeness, the excitement, the sense of belonging, it all feels like divine confirmation. But the fruit it bears will reveal the truth. Does it lead to clarity or confusion? Does it nurture peace or provoke anxiety? Are your prayers more frequent, or has their presence replaced your need for prayer at all? Affection becomes idolatry when we allow it to define our identity, when we are no longer whole without their affirmation, when a text message holds more power over our mood than Scripture, when their disappointment wounds more deeply than God's conviction. This is the signpost that affection has taken the wrong place in the soul. What was meant to be enjoyed in submission to God now controls us in subtle, consuming ways. It is here that many suffer silently, calling it love when in fact it is slavery. Slavery to a version of ourselves molded by another person's approval. Slavery to a fear of losing what has become our emotional oxygen. And yet, in protecting the idol, we erode our very self. Our spiritual life dulls, our purpose weakens, and our joy becomes fragile, entirely dependent on the temperature of someone else's attention. True love, the kind rooted in God, does not enslave, it liberates. It does not consume all space in the heart, it makes more room for God. It complements your calling, not competes with it. But when affection morphs into obsession, when the person becomes the prize instead of the journey toward holiness together, the relationship begins to bend under the weight of expectations it was never meant to carry. The soul was designed for God first. Any affection that asks you to forsake Him in order to keep it has already turned dark. Even if it smiles, even if it's sweet, even if it feels like destiny, the devil never tempts with ugliness, he tempts with counterfeit light. The danger of idolatrous affection is precisely that it doesn't feel wrong. It feels right, thrilling, intimate, urgent, but not every flame is divine. In Scripture, even the deepest loves were subject to divine authority. Abraham loved Isaac, but God tested that love. Peter loved Jesus, but Jesus asked, "Do you love me more than these?" Whenever affection is put to the test, it is not because God wants to remove joy. It is because He wants to purify it. He wants to ensure that what we love does not rival Him, but reflects Him. In romantic relationships, especially, affection can whisper false promises. It tells us we are complete in one another. It sings songs of fate and soulmate and you are my everything, but these words, while poetic, are not pure. No human being can be your everything and survive the pressure. No person can hold your soul together. That is a job for the Creator alone. When affection is rightly ordered, it becomes holy. It strengthens us, draws us nearer to God, and teaches us sacrifice without distortion. But when it becomes an idol, it erodes the soul quietly. We begin to expect perfection from dust. We place the burden of eternal satisfaction on shoulders that were never meant to carry it. And when they falter, as all people do, we are left not only disappointed, but disoriented, spiritually depleted by a love that became a god. In a world that markets love as pleasure, ease, and endless comfort, the idea of suffering as a test of love is offensive. It disrupts the fantasy. It cuts through the illusion that love, if it is real, will always be light, always be smooth, always be wrapped in warm feelings and effortless compatibility. But reality tells a different story, one that is harder, holier, and far more enduring. If affection is tested in beauty, then union is proven in brokenness. It is not when two people laugh together, but when they grieve together, endure together, and press on together that the truth of their bond is revealed. Suffering strips away the unnecessary. It peels back the surface and exposes what's real. It removes the performance, the charm, the pleasantries. In hardship, we meet the unedited version of one another. The masks fall. The pretense dissolves. What remains is what has always been true, now uncovered by fire. And it is in that uncovering that we find what kind of union we actually have. Many relationships thrive in the sun. They are built on shared pleasures, aligned goals, and emotional compatibility. These things are good, even necessary, but they are not sufficient. because life is not only lived in the sun, it is lived in shadow. There will be sickness, there will be betrayal, there will be unexpected loss, disappointment, financial strain, emotional fatigue, spiritual drought. In those seasons, romantic love alone is not enough. The question is not simply, do you love one another, but can you suffer well together? True union is not just holding hands, it is holding burdens. It is choosing one another when life stops making sense. It is staying, praying, and forgiving when everything inside you screams to retreat. This kind of love cannot be faked. It must be forged, and forging only happens in the heat. Suffering introduces the soul to its rawest instincts. It shows us who we run to, what we cling to, what we protect, and what we fear. When suffering is shared in a relationship, it either becomes a fracture point or a binding agent. Some break under its weight because their connection was built on preference, not promise. But others mysteriously come out stronger, not because the pain was pleasant, but because they chose each other when it was not. In that choice, day after day, covenant is born. This is the hidden strength of suffering. It teaches you how to carry each other when neither of you is strong. When one falters, the other holds. When one doubts, the other believes. When one breaks down, the other builds up. You become not only lovers or companions, but intercessors, advocates, protectors of each other's soul. In a union shaped by God, suffering is not a punishment, it is a purifier. It reveals what kind of soil your relationship was planted in. If it was shallow, the roots will show. But if it was deep watered by prayer, covered in grace, rooted in shared purpose, it will not only survive, it will grow. It will become a testimony. Shared suffering creates sacred intimacy, the kind that no date night or vacation could manufacture. When you've wept together, prayed through sleepless nights, fought spiritual battles side by side, endured loss with hands clasped and hearts trembling, that is love refined by fire. And refined love is not easily shaken. We often speak of being there for someone as if it's just a nice just-er. But to be there in suffering is something far deeper. It is not offering solutions. It is presence in its purest form. Sometimes words fail. Sometimes prayers are groans, but the ministry of presence, simply being near, available, faithful, becomes a silent sermon of love. This kind of shared journey breaks pride, builds trust, and fosters humility. It teaches you to confess without shame, to listen without defense, to serve without resentment. In suffering, selfishness cannot survive. One must learn to give without guarantee, to hope without proof, to forgive without condition. There is a reason why vows, real vows, mention suffering, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth. These are not poetic lines, they are prophecies. They are promises to stand when feelings fade, to believe when reason fails, to love not only with the heart but with the will. When suffering is shared and love remains, it becomes more than romance, it becomes covenant. And covenant love does not flee the fire, it walks through it. Together, in the landscape of modern love, few things are more misunderstood than the difference between emotion and direction. We are trained almost from childhood to follow our feelings. We are taught that butterflies in the stomach mean yes, that euphoria is a green light, that peace means proceed and discomfort means danger. But the heart, though it is capable of beauty, is not always trustworthy. Emotions may accompany wisdom, but they do not define it. And when it comes to relationships, choosing someone based only on how you feel is like steering a ship by the wind rather than the compass. There is a deeper path, one guided not by emotional waves, but by divine direction. And divine direction is not always accompanied by a rush of excitement. Sometimes it feels quiet, unremarkable, even uncertain, because while emotions are loud, direction is often subtle. It is steady, not showy. It does not plead for attention. It simply invites obedience. But because we have equated deep emotion with divine affirmation, we miss what God may be speaking when the music fades and the stillness sets in. Emotions are gifts, but they are not governors. They reveal what we value, fear, desire, or avoid, but they are not qualified to decide what is true or lasting. Emotions are momentary, direction is anchored in eternity. And where your heart may tremble, God's path will remain unmoved. Feelings may fluctuate with hormones, circumstances, or mood, but direction, when it is of God, remains faithful to His character, His word, and His timing. There are relationships that begin in fireworks and end in ashes. There are paths we choose because they feel right, only to discover that they were never right at all. This is not to say that emotion is wrong, but that it must be tested. The human heart can mistake trauma bonding for intimacy, loneliness for love, and infatuation for compatibility. The adrenaline of attraction is not the same as the assurance of calling. One fades, the other endures. A relationship based solely on emotional highs will require constant stimulation to survive. The moment the feelings dim, the doubts begin. But when direction is your foundation, the relationship is not built on how much it thrills you, but on how well it aligns with purpose, character, and God's will. A union led by direction rather than emotion will still feel, but it will not follow the feeling. It will follow truth. Direction is about discernment. It asks harder questions, not just how do they make me feel, but who am I becoming around them? Not just are we happy, but are we holy? Direction may lead you into a relationship that doesn't fit the mold of your fantasy, but fulfills something far greater, your formation. You may not always feel overwhelmed with passion, but you will notice growth, peace, clarity, conviction. These are not always accompanied by thrill, but they are evidence of alignment. God is not in the business of emotional manipulation. He is not playing games with your heart. If He is leading you, it will not always feel easy, but it will feel anchored. There will be something in your spirit beneath the excitement or even the anxiety that quietly says, "This is right. Keep walking." That still small voice does not shout over your emotions. It whispers through them. It is important to remember that emotional ease is not a guarantee of rightness, and emotional discomfort is not necessarily a red flag. Sometimes we feel unsettled simply because we are afraid, because something good is unfamiliar, because growth feels like risk, but direction is not a slave to those reactions. Direction calls us higher. It asks us to walk in faith, not just in feeling. In fact, some of the most divinely aligned relationships may begin with doubt, not because the love is absent, but because the soul senses the weight of the choice. Covenant is not light. It is sacred. And when we confuse emotional ease with confirmation, we walk away from what God may be building, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't exciting enough. We trade endurance for comfort. But comfort never built a legacy. You will not always feel in love. You will not always feel certain. You will not always feel spiritual. But if your direction is grounded in God, if you have prayed, waited, sought counsel, and walked with integrity, then the lack of emotion is not an alarm bell. It may simply be the silence before maturity, the settling before the deep roots, the clearing of clouds so that your path becomes more about your post than your preference. Direction invites you to trust what doesn't shout, to follow what is rooted, not what is thrilling, to move not because you feel like it, but because it is right. There is a deep, ancient voice within every person, a quiet knowing, a subtle but unmistakable awareness that often gets drowned out in the noise of desire. It is the voice of the soul, the part of you fashioned not for the fleeting but for the eternal. It does not shout, but it speaks. And what it speaks of is truth, direction, purpose. But this voice is subtle. And the flesh, loud, impulsive, ever hungry, has become a master of distraction. The flesh craves immediacy. It wants what feels good now. It wants beauty without substance, connection without commitment, closeness without cost. It whispers, you deserve this, you've waited long enough, why not take it? It is persuasive because it speaks the language of emotion. And yet, underneath the cravings, there remains that persistent pull, the soul stirring, unsettled, aware that what's being offered on the surface does not match what it truly needs. Many relationships begin in the realm of the flesh, not because they are evil, but because they are easy. Attraction is easy. Chemistry is easy. The longing for companionship is natural, but the soul was made for something deeper than chemistry. It was made for covenant. And when the flesh leads without restraint, the soul suffers quietly. It does not fight like the flesh, it mourns. It grieves when we choose shallow over sacred, noise over discernment, pleasure over peace. The soul, unlike the flesh, cannot be fooled by appearances. It knows when something is off, even when the body is thrilled. It knows when you're settling, even when the excitement is strong. It knows when you've traded alignment for attention, connection for convenience. But because its voice is still and soft, it is easy to ignore until you wake up spiritually starved in the arms of someone who cannot feed you. The most dangerous relationships are not always the obviously toxic ones. Sometimes they are the ones that feel almost right, almost aligned, almost godly, almost safe, but almost is the enemy of discernment. The flesh is content with almost because it looks and feels good. The soul, however, hungers for what is fully true, fully whole, fully surrendered. And it knows when something is missing, even if you can't explain why. There are moments when you lie awake at night, everything around you seems fine, yet your spirit is restless. That is not anxiety, it is awareness. It is your soul refusing to settle for surface-level peace. It is God calling you deeper, not into fear, but into clarity. The soul cannot rest where God is not present. It cannot pretend forever. It will whisper truth again and again until you either heed it or harden yourself to it. This is why silence is necessary, why prayer is not a ritual but a rescue. Because in stillness the flesh loses volume and the soul finds breath. You begin to feel what is real again. You remember who you are. You stop asking, does this make me happy? And start asking, does this make me whole? The flesh seeks highs, the soul seeks harmony. And only one leads to peace. Sometimes God will remove comfort to get your attention, not to punish you, but to reawaken your soul. He allows discontent not to torment you, but to warn you. When the excitement fades and all you're left with is confusion, that is grace. That is mercy refusing to let you build a life on emotional sand. It is the Spirit lifting the veil so you can see beyond what the flesh dressed up as love. The soul is honest. It does not flatter. It does not justify. It knows. And when you stop running from it, when you sit long enough to listen, you begin to remember what matters. You remember that beauty fades, charm deceives, chemistry burns out. But truth, alignment, shared purpose, spiritual safety, these last, these remain when the fire dims and the silence grows long. The flesh may tempt you into situations your soul has already warned you about. It will always offer a shortcut to what only obedience can secure. But nothing the flesh offers is free. It will cost you clarity, time, peace, and often your sense of self. And after it has taken all, it leaves you wondering how you ever confused lust for love, attention for affection, closeness for covenant. But even in this there is grace, for when the soul cries out, God responds. He is not far from the brokenhearted. He does not scorn those who have followed the flesh but now return in repentance. He restores, he realigns. He awakens you once more to the sound of his voice within you, the soul that knows, that waits, that seeks not what is easy, but what is eternal. In the design of meaningful relationships, especially those rooted in faith and covenant purpose, is not a side consideration. It is not an accessory or a distant dream to be pursued individually without thought for the other. Purpose is central. It defines direction, shapes decisions, and forms the very core of identity. When two people come together, it is not only hearts that must align, but callings, convictions, and missions. Without this, love becomes a collision course, because where purpose does not intersect, it will inevitably compete. At first, competing purposes may seem like mere scheduling conflicts or personality differences, but over time, the friction grows. You feel the pull to move in one direction while your partner is equally pulled in another. What once felt like partnership becomes polite tension or worse, silent resentment. This is not because either person is wrong, but because the relationship was not rooted in shared vision. Affection may carry you a while, but affection alone cannot carry the weight of opposing destinies. When God creates individuals, He assigns them specific burdens, passions, and callings. These aren't hobbies or interests, they are the soul's assignments. And when a relationship ignores or belittles those assignments for the sake of convenience or compatibility, something sacred is sacrificed. You may still smile for photos. You may still function as a couple. But beneath the surface, a quiet grief takes root, a mourning of the life unlived, of the voice unheard, of the purpose slowly dying in silence. True union, the kind that withstands time and fire, is not built on similarity alone. It is built on synergy. It's not, are we the same? But do we serve the same kingdom? It's not, do our dreams match, but do our purposes make room for one another, feed one another, strengthen one another? When purposes align, sacrifice feels holy, but when purposes clash, sacrifice feels like self-erasure. This is why discernment in the early stages is critical. You must ask hard questions before the feelings run too deep to see clearly. Where is your life going? Where is theirs? What breaks your heart? What moves theirs to action? What is God asking of you in this life? Will this person help you obey or quietly pull you away from it? These questions are not cold, they are courageous, because a union without shared mission may be romantic, but it will not be redemptive. You were not created to orbit someone else's purpose, nor were they created to orbit yours. God does not design people to disappear into another's shadow. He designs them to walk in tandem. Intersecting purposes do not mean identical callings, but they must harmonize. One may be a builder, the other a healer. One may be called to the marketplace, the other to ministry, but together they create a tapestry that tells a single story, faithfulness. And when purpose intersects, something powerful happens. The relationship becomes more than companionship, it becomes commission. You are not just loving one another, you are advancing light together. You are not merely surviving life, you are sowing eternity. In such a relationship, every trial becomes training, every challenge becomes fuel, every prayer becomes a shared breath. It is not without conflict, but it is never without clarity. Purpose-driven love requires maturity, because when both people carry calling, ego must die. Comparison must die. They need to be louder. Bigger, more seen must die. True union celebrates mutual becoming. It makes space. It listens. It says, I will not shrink you to feel tall. And I will not abandon what God has asked of me just to fit inside your comfort. It is both fierce and gentle, both protective and releasing. It is not threatened by greatness, it cultivates it. This kind of relationship does not ask, what can I get from this, but who are we becoming in this? It seeks fruit, not fantasy. It aims not for ease, but impact. And it understands that love without alignment becomes labor without joy. You may still move forward, but you will limp. You may still stay together, but something divine will feel distant. Purpose is not a detail, it is the direction. And if your roads do not cross in meaning, they will eventually part in motion. This is not harsh. It is mercy. For God in His wisdom knows what you do not yet see, that the path of your calling is sacred, and joining hands with someone who cannot walk it with you is not romance, it is spiritual compromise. And in the end, the pain of releasing what distracts is far less than the agony of betraying what you were born to become.